Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Todd Talk podcast. I'm excited to have on my guest today, which I'm going to introduce formally here in just a moment. His name is Vin Zeeland, soon to be Dr. Vin Zeeland. So, um, I'm Todd Marshall HEARNSBERGER. I am the founder of LeadWell Solutions and also the author of, I'm going to show you my book, author of the book, The Dysfunctional Leader. And I specialize in, of course, leadership, but my main focus is on dysfunctional and toxic leadership and how to become healthy leaders. And so that's my passion in life. Um, I have an MBA degree currently, and I'm pursuing a doctorate in strategic leadership through Liberty University. And I'm excited to have Vin Zeeland with me today because he also is a doctoral student at Liberty University along with me in the strategic leadership program. That's how we met each other. And so I'm going to formally introduce you with the bio that you had sent me. I'm just going to read it because that just seems to be the easy thing. I don't want to botch anything up. And then we're going to kind of get into this and spend the next few moments together. But welcome, Vin. Glad you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
So Vin Zeeland is a full-time doctoral student at Liberty University. Go Liberty.
Woo.
Specializing in strategic leadership with a diverse educational background that includes a degree in theology, a second bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in strategic communication. Vin is a true transdisciplinarian. He also holds a certification in generative AI prompt engineering, which you were helping me with that earlier when we went to lunch this week, and I appreciate that. Before embarking on his academic journey, Vin had a vibrant career as an international recording artist and touring musician, releasing 5 full-length albums. He is also the publisher of he's a published children's author and recently authored a parable memoir called The Irony of Ethical Leadership. That sounds interesting. Vin brings over 20 years experience as a pastor and teacher. In addition to his professional pursuits, Vin owned and operated an organic farm in California, a fun fact that reflects his commitment to sustainability and community. That's another interesting thing I didn't know all the details about. His research focuses on organizational culture and leadership, aiming to design and develop innovative tools like Leadership Dimensions Matrix and the Culture Strategy Assessment, both intended to enhance the organizational performance through a framework rooted in biblical design. Vin loves to share his insights on strategic leadership, organizational culture, and the intersections of his unique career path. So, Vin, again, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Again, we just met recently, but we've had classes together. We're on this journey together for our doctorate degree. And I know leadership is passionate for you like it is with me. And we had lunch earlier this week to kind of get to know each other better. And I'm telling you, we're on the same pathway as far as making sure that we are ourselves and we create healthy leaders and help turn dysfunctional leaders into functional leaders and healthy. So, kind of tell me a little bit about your background. You've got an organization called the Culture Strategy. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And kind of tell me a little bit about that. Tell us all about those and how that works.
Yeah. So, having been raised in Wisconsin, told you a little bit about that story. I'm originally uh, from Wisconsin, a transplant to California for a little while, and then had to rethink my life a bunch of years ago, and I moved to Texas. But why I became interested in culture is there's an advantage, a strategic advantage to businesses to have a designed culture. Uh, Little known fact. So in 1970, the year that you and I were born, there was a shift from uh, industry, no matter what industry, there was a shift, a change that came about, And it was Friedman who said, we're no longer going to be beholden. So they call it the Friedman Doctrine. We're no longer beholden to um, the people, to the workers, to the ones who help build our organizations. We're no longer going to be supportive of them. What we're going to do is we're going to invest into our shareholders. We're beholden to them. And so what we saw was a shift that came at the cost of organizational culture. Uh, First thing. The second thing that came of that was we saw this lifespan commitment of people working for companies who, worked 25, 30, 40 years in one company. They might have two jobs. What changed with this strategy, the Friedman Doctrine, um, what changed is all of a sudden now you can have, on average, 4 years in a company for an organization, and then you move. And in my research, what I've discovered is that if you have 4 years on average, some less, some more, what you're going to find is that there's this changing and shifting that's going on, right? The ecosystem changes, and what ends up happening is now you have a bunch of people who had certain expectations at one company. Now they're having to adjust and adopt new expectations. And let's just say a manager learns from another manager, a supervisor, and they learned their practice of managing, and then they move to another company, and then that company is now adopted. Now cultures can't be established, and there's this discombobulation, a disconnect. And my fight is to say to the stakeholders and the shareholders, enough's enough. Let's settle down here. Let's get settled, and let's create great organizational cultures, because when you do that, what you'll find is the numbers that I found is 15 to 36% and as high as 40% of increase of generated income or revenue for the company. And you see performance just, I mean, it just will just go through the roof. It's crazy to me that we're okay, that as companies and organizations, that as leaders, that we're okay with the disconnected culture, the disengaged culture. That's my argument.
Yeah, well, it's a very valid argument. Because I know personally, and you know personally, being more of an expert in this field when it comes to culture, is the fact that everything rises and falls on leadership. How important does leadership play in the healthiness of a work culture?
Well, first of all, we have to define what leadership is and what leadership is not. Okay.
Okay.
Oftentimes in the workforce, you have a seat at the table, you have a designation, a title, and that, let's say, director and above, right? That automatically makes you a leader. Well, no, that doesn't. That makes you a boss,
Mm, that's
right?
a
That
good
is
perspective.
so what I have found in my 40 years, which is what I wrote in my book, is I wrote this memoir, if you will, but I wrote it in a parable. It is my story, but I use a character name, right? And so the character's name is Chip Stone. And the whole idea behind it is that it showcases different involvement. Chip Stone, the character, is involved in um, anything from music to ministry to he's on this journey. He's worked in sales, and he's done a lot of different things, and showing the different leadership styles at different levels. And so to answer your question, I'm going to kind of weave it together, is leadership is not about your title. It's about how you serve others. This is an ancient understanding, a practice in which, you know, well, there's a scripture that says, the world will lord it over you, but you are not that. Okay, so I'm just kind of paraphrasing Jesus' words and summarizing. He said, but he among you who wants to be a leader must first become a servant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's think of it this way. The way the world looks at it, it's like a pyramid. Okay. And he who sits at the top rules all at the bottom. And Jesus inverted that pyramid and said, he who wants to be great must be at the bottom, serving all, right? And it's an upside down. It's an inverted pyramid that the world doesn't understand. It sounds crazy, but it's the most effective and impactful way. I mean, think about Jesus. He was an itinerant preacher who traveled by foot, and yet today we still feel the effects of
Mm-hmm.
his words, his actions, his his followers, his disciples. They all served after they got scared, and then they realigned their lives with the truth, and then they started to serve. And they didn't have money. They weren't billionaire corporate CEOs. These were guys who were fishermen and carpenters and tax collectors. And I mean, these guys were they were the rejected of society, and yet now we still study, millions upon millions of people study their lives and write papers to this day about the impact that their ministry had all over the world. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. So, on this podcast, of course, with my focus being more about all things leadership, especially the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah,
The ugly part is something that we don't really focus on too much. We always talk about all the positive stuff, which is great, but there are some dark shadows in leadership.
yeah,
Um, I like to describe it as a spectrum or a pendulum, where on one side of the spectrum is this extreme unhealthy leadership traits that includes narcissism and bullying and many other what I call dysfunctional leadership traits. My book goes into all of that.
yeah,
And then you got the total opposite side, which means there's the side of leadership that is more on the healthy side. And we obviously have dysfunctional moments, imperfect moments as leaders, but we don't live in dysfunctional and toxicity all the time. There
right.
are leaders, and I like to, my focus is in the Christian community because I have a passion that if we are going to be leadership examples, we should be exemplifying great leadership in the Christian community and set the example for the world.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, we have a small percentage of dysfunctional, toxic Christian leaders that need to be educated or get out of leadership, in my opinion, depending on how extreme they are.
Yeah.
So, in light of that, how does your culture strategy fit into identifying dysfunctional slash toxic leadership, the extreme kind?
Sure.
How does that fit into helping to mitigate and to solve some of those issues? Because there are leaders in that live on that side of the spectrum that don't even realize how toxic they are or dysfunctional they are. How does your vision and passion fit into that world?
Well, first of all, having studied this for years, I actually started a podcast. It's been shelved for a little bit. The culture strategy, the doctorate has been my main focus at this point, and I felt like I needed to develop something that actually is proven that can be studied, right? Not just a hunch, not just intuition. Even though I know from experience, it's at most anecdotal to most leaders. They saw it in action, over the years. I mean, honestly, I can give you case study after case study, right? But now I want to study it in order to prove it. To answer your question, um, these toxic leaders don't know who they are in the first place. Okay. There was a study put out by Gallup. I've hit pretty hard on this. Statistics is not anything that I specialize in, but when I read them and I understand them, somebody else has done the hard work, and they bring out the reports. 80 to 85% of all adults don't really know who they are.
That is so
Okay.
true. I believe that.
Um, if you don't know who you are, if you don't know your values, or you do have stated values, but you don't live by those values, you can't really put it into action, right? You can't put into action what you don't know. So if you don't know anything about yourself, what do the philosophers say? Know thyself, right? And but yet people don't really want to know themselves. I don't think they really like to introspect a whole lot because there's a real darkness on the inside of all of us. And another thing is people don't want to talk about negative stuff. They only want to talk about the numbers. So I just wrote an article about this. Um, Businesses tend to focus and beat their people up on the metrics, the measurements, instead of sitting down and having a conversation about what's really going on. And if you make if you make an excuse for why it didn't go well, they'll beat you up on your weakness and tell you what's wrong with you and why you didn't do a good job. And they'll just give some anecdotal remedy, prescription, and walk away and say, you better get it right or your job's on the line. Right?
It's a business transaction.
Right.
There's
It's
no
all,
emotional intelligence
no,
involved.
it's all transactional. And that is I will tell you that is not just a problem in business. That's a problem in all areas, whether it be family, local community, local government. I mean, look at what we've gone through over the last, I don't know, 50, 60 years. It's a, it's a, there's I just read an article this week and it really has been fascinating. Alfonso Monturi, so I want to give him credit for it. He said, we have wicked problems that need organic solutions
Hmm. Wow.
in education, in business, in church, in government, really every area of life. We need organic solutions for wicked problems. And and I think he's right. I mean, I sat there, I read hundreds of articles. Okay. I mean, you know that. I read hundreds of articles, and this was the first article in my whole career where I sat on the edge of my seat. Are we still there?
Yeah, I hear
Oh,
you.
all right. It just said that my internet was unstable. But I sat on the edge of my seat reading every single word because it just was so potent. It was so full of information that resonated with me. And all of a sudden I realized, wow, there are other people out there who are thinking in this way, right?
Yeah. That's amazing. I would like to read that article. But you mentioned earlier in which we use the phrase emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
basically being able to understand people. One of the things that I did unique than many other leaders, and I learned this from somewhere, I can't say it's my creation, but I learned it somewhere over the years of my studying of leadership.
Yeah.
And whenever I was leading people, especially paid staff, I would have, I don't know, it was probably like twice a year. We
Mhm.
would have what we call sharpening the saws. And there's a story, an analogy out there of two people, two lumberjacks that were having a contest to chop down the same amount of trees to see who can chop them down the fastest. And to
Right.
make a very long story short with that, that they both started off chopping very fast, equal pace. Man, they were chopping trees, but one decided to stop and sharpen his saw periodically, while the other one decided not to do that and kept chopping away. Well, it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare story. It ended up that the one who stopped every once in a while to sharpen his saw
Right.
actually won the tournament because he took time to do what was the right thing, and that was sharpening the saw. Where the other one, axe got dull. He worked harder towards the end and just couldn't finish it out.
Sure.
So I would have sharpening the saws with my team periodically. And basically, it allowed them to come to my office and to share whatever's on their heart, the good, the bad, including the ugly, even if
Sure.
it was against me, and it was a judgment-free zone.
Mhm.
It was a time for them to come in and just tell me everything, even if it wasn't good stuff, because I would tell them I can't change anything unless I know about it.
Right.
If there's an issue you have with me, my leadership, someone else that's under you or above you in other supervisor positions, we want to know about it. So I allowed them the opportunity to really share their heart without me judging them in any negative way whatsoever. And I have to tell you, I got so much positive response from the people saying, "You really care about me this much that you're allowing me this opportunity."
Yeah.
And I learned over the years of doing this, that our bond got stronger. I was able to understand them more because I emotionally connected with them rather than being transactional.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? How's that fit into your strategy of, of the culture strategy?
Yeah. So that's a great point, and kudos to you for intuitively recognizing how to engage, uh, because without communication, there is no collaboration. Without collaboration, there is no innovation. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, let
Good.
me let me share a quick story. There was, so I was a corporate trainer. I traveled all over the country, went to, 30 some states throughout the United States. And I worked with a couple hundred people, and I would coach and train, 20 people a day, right? Via Zoom or Teams. But I would travel, probably about 50% of my time was traveling. So we had these mergers and acquisitions. And what that means is anyone in the business world, one parent company buys, so we would acquire another company and we would then integrate them in. And I was hired to do the mitigating in dealing with people transferring in to the company. They had to get used to not only our operations systems, but they also had to be integrated into the company culture, and that company culture is the biggest fight. Systems are, I mean, systems are systems. You get used to it over time. You may not like it at first, but it is what it is. But it's the culture. It's I am a stranger in a strange land. I don't speak the language. I don't know what it is that you all really, what your values are. I don't know anybody in the company. And so my job was to go and soften the blow, to sit down and have that conversation. And I was always brought in, well, when you deal with a couple hundred people, um, and you do this on a daily basis, and that's all you do, that's your focus, you start to build relationships. Well, I had a situation in which a director, so I was a corporate trainer, and I had a director who was the director of operations, wanted to fire a woman, and her manager also wanted to fire her. And I received a phone call. I never met this woman. She lived in Tennessee. I got a phone. I'm walking into work one morning and I get a personal cell phone call I don't know how she got my number, but she tracked it down and she said, of all the people, 500 employees, of all the people, you're the only person I can trust.
Hmm.
Which, I mean, praise God for that, you
Yeah.
know, that she felt she could trust me. So she called me and she said, "Hey, look, I'm about to be fired. But when you guys took me on, I know my job. I have 100%. I had 100% occupancy, so we were a commercial real estate company. And she says, I know my job. You guys purchased it based upon my performance. My performance. I was the only manager on site. She goes, and now they want to fire me because it dropped from 100% down to less than 60%, so 59% of occupancy. Our budget was 85%. And I said to her, I said, okay, what changed? Did you change? She said, no. She said, I understand that I was going to lose customers about 10 to 15%. That was projected, which would have been right in the pocket, right? Of 85%. She goes, but the way you guys have handled us, I had lost more customers. She goes, and I can't do it because your system's not working and I don't have any good relationships within the company. And I said, okay. I said, I tell you what, I can't make this decision, but what I can do is I can advocate for you. How much time do you need to turn this around to at least get yourself up to the minimum of 85%? She said, a month? She says, but I have to do it my way. And I went, what is your way? And so she explained it. And I said, well, that's reasonable. And she said, okay. I said, well, let me go talk to your director. So I did. And I said, give her a month. I said, don't fire her. I said, she's competent. I said, and by the way, if you fire her, just so you know, one, as a human being, I won't respect you. I'll respect you as per your position, but I won't respect you as a human being. But two, when you let her go, you now are going to have to put out advertisements to find somebody. You're going to lose more people. There's going to be less people served, and you're going to find that that whole site is going to drop way down, and you're going to have a hard time building it back up. I said, give her a month. She'll turn it around. That seems intuitive. He said, I'll give her a month. A month later, I got a call from her, and she said, I'm up to 90%.
Wow.
And I said, how did you do that? And she said, I just did it like what we discussed. And to this day, she is the number one producer in the company. She's still there.
Wow.
And her manager and her director are no longer there.
Wow. So that's what I call empowerment. Basically, you all gave her and empowered her for a month to do it her way because she felt like her method, her strategy was going to be more effective. And it turned out to be that way. I think
Right,
sometimes us as leaders, sometimes is just empower our people. They know what to do, they're trained, they obviously have tenure there with the organization. Let them do and work in their sweet spot
yeah,
and not micromanage them.
right,
And
right,
that's a major issue in a lot of organizations. There's systems and processes set up in place, but it may not fit that person's personality.
right,
That person may need to change the system a little bit to fit their personality style, their leadership style, so that they get things accomplished. Do you
right.
see that as an effective strategy? You've already proven a story that it's an effective strategy.
I can give you hundreds and hundreds of examples of that. Unfortunately, I can't put that into my study. I have to go out and do it again, right? Now, the reality is that when you free people up, so I just wrote an article that I posted on LinkedIn, and it's called "Reduction Leadership Reductionism Kills Creativity."
Mm.
Um, so think of it this way. So if you ask the question, well, what is love? In a reductionist point of view, well, love, it just comes down to the biology of hormones and, that create these feelings, right? No, it's far more than that. It's deeper than that. In fact, we can't really ultimately define it because it's so powerful. So, we could talk about all kinds of reductionist views, but in business as a leader, the problem really comes down to leaders don't, one, know themselves mostly, usually. If they don't know themselves, and they have no real foundational, you know, let me change that. Plumb line. What's the plumb line?
Hmm, that's good.
If their plumb line is off, okay, how can they, if their own plumb line, we'll call it their moral center, is off, how can they communicate with others in a way if they don't get to know them on a relationship basis? I think about another really interesting story. There was this snowstorm a long time ago. There was this snowstorm that we had, and I was driving into work really early in the morning, and I saw one of my coworkers. His car was in the ditch. Okay. I got out, I talked to him. I didn't have a shovel. I mean, we're talking blizzard conditions. And it was Christmas Eve. And I said, look, let me go to the store, to the shop, and I'm gonna pull out a shovel. I'm gonna get some salt and I'm gonna help you out. Well, the store was gonna open at 6, and there was a manager, regional manager there. She was just visiting. And I came in and told her the story, and I said, I'm going to go grab a shovel, and I'm going to go grab some salt. And she said, if you do, I'll fire you. And I said, well, that's fine. I said, but this guy is stuck. And she said, you better not be late. I said, she said, if he's not here on time, I'm going to fire him too.
Wow.
And so I took the shovel, took the salt. She's yelling at me as I'm going out the door. If you're going to pay for that as soon as the register is open.
Wow.
Okay. So I go out. I'm just doing the human thing. It's Christmas. It's the season of giving, right?
Mm.
Um, but no, we've got a business to run and we got tills to fill and all that. So I help him out. Him and I are walking into the store. I open the door for him, and this is a long time ago. She's never going to see this. I'll call her by name. Her name is Kathy. Um, And Kathy goes, "Oh, it's so good to see you. I'm so glad you're here." And I felt a little bit of vomit at the back of my throat, you know. Um, that's everywhere. It's pervasive. And here's the thing, and this is something that we've got to be careful about too as leaders, right? So there's this paradox of fighting the enemy. Okay. And that paradox of fighting the enemy, we fight against moral corruption or the dark side. We look at the hero's journey, or we look at the iron law. So this is an interesting one, the iron law of oligarchy. In organizational theory, there's a concept that states that organizations grow, they become more structured and bureaucratic, which can lead to various issues. So when we fight against those issues, we have to, as leaders, be careful that the things that we fight against, that we don't become like them ourselves. So that means we're constantly introspecting, we're checking ourselves. That's like Jesus saying, um, be careful of, making a judgment against the speck in your brother's eye. First, go ahead and remove the log out of your own, right? And so we, as leaders, have two battles that we're fighting. One, the battle of self, and then two, that we have an understanding that if we are fighting against something that's corrupt, that we don't become that ourselves. And we can't be overly judgmental. We have to bring some grace in it, but we also have to stand firm on our convictions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This is some great information. We only have a few minutes left, and I want to have you back. You have a lot to say. This little bit of time was not enough time for us to really get into all that you are an expert in, and I want to have you back. So, kind of tell people how to get a hold of you, how to find you, how to get a hold of your book called The Irony of Ethical Leadership, or
Yeah.
anything else that you're producing, your website. Give us all that information before we log off here.
Yeah, my website is theculturestrategy.com. I also do a little bit of marketing generation work. You can also look at my website, and all my telephone number and email be on there. And it's Zeeland.design. So www.zeeland, Zeeland.design. And so I do some pretty cool graphic work. Um, and so I do logos and create all kinds of images for whatever your business is doing. But overall, I'm really easy to find. I think I'm the only Vin Zealand in the world.
Yeah.
So pretty easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest channel to reach. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who would like to know more information about me and my services, and also possibly to even purchase my book, The Dysfunctional Leader, you can go to ToddMarshallHearnsberger.com. I know that's a mouthful, but you can see my name right down here on the bottom there. It's just all one word, ToddMarshallHearnsberger.com. It'll
Yeah.
tell you all about me along with the book and how to get it. And you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok with at the handle of at ToddTalk.Leader, ToddTalk.Leader. And so, Vin, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I look forward to many more years of learning from you. And come back and be on a podcast again. Will you do that?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Todd Talk today. I look forward. Stay tuned.